You are listening to 99.1 WQRT LP Indianapolis, and this is Create Here. Produced by artists and curators from Big Car Collaborative, Create Here is your place to listen to conversations with people making intriguing, innovative, and impactful things happen on the cultural front in Indianapolis, Indiana, and beyond. Find out more and access additional episodes at WQRT.org.
You're listening to 99.1 WQRT LP Indianapolis. In this episode of Create Here, we are joined by Julian Jamaal Jones, and my name is Shatay Marsh. I'm co-founder of Big Car and chief curator at Tube Factory Art Space. Julian Jamaal Jones is a multidisciplinary artist and educator born and raised in Indianapolis, Indiana. Jones received his bachelor's degree in photography in 2020 from the Herron School of Art and Design and a master's in photography from Cranbrook in 2022. Under the tutelage of Chris Fraser, Jones was a recipient of the 2023 CICF Artist Ambassadors Travel Grant awarded by ArtsConnect's Artists to Watch in 2022, the recipient of the 2022 Playground Emerging Artist Fellowship supported by the Knight Foundation, and the recipient of the prestigious Museum Purchase Award from Cranbrook Art Museum in 2022. Jones's works are in the permanent textile collections of Cranbrook Art Museum, Richmond Art Museum, and the Book Tower in Detroit. Welcome. Thank you for joining us, Julian.
Thank you. This is awesome.
Yeah, I'm so excited about this show. Mm-hmm. I've been a long time admirer of your work, and one interesting thing I think we can start out with is moving from photography to working in textiles. Can you talk about that? Like what was your work in photography like before?
So my work in photography was mainly fashion. I've always had interest in fashion as a young kid. I remember looking at America's Next Top Model with Tyra Banks. And I always was interested in the fashion shoots and how creative they were and the models posing and the creativity with all of that. So I just kind of decided to just go for it. A lot of my friends in school were models, so I did a lot of test shoots with them growing up. And then it just kind of like fumbled into this career aspect. So at Herron, I was studying more like fashion, body movement, not really thinking about fiber or quilting at the moment because I wasn't really around that at Herron, but I was just really focusing on like photography, wanting to be a fashion photographer once I left Herron, moving to the New York, like every artist wanting to go to a New York. But I had graduate school in the back of my head, not knowing what school I wanted to go to or what I really wanted to do in graduate school. My graduation was 2020, the pandemic. So a lot of things happened in the whirlwind. I lost my father to ALS the week of the pandemic. So that was kind of hard. I kind of was in this depression state. But then probably 2 weeks after graduation, I got an email from my professor, Stefan, from Herron saying there's an opening in their photography program at Cranbrook. And I remember Cranbrook during my research there. I was like, oh yeah, I remember Cranbrook. So, I talked about it. I prayed about it. I talked to my mom about it and she was like, you should go for it. So I was like, okay. So I applied and got in and I moved to Bloomfield Hills in September of 2020. Scared, didn't know what I was going to do, what I wanted to pursue. But I just kind of stuck with it and kind of just, figured it out during my stay there. But I think one thing that kind of transitioned from photography to fiber was my cohort during that time. Quenisha Wood was a very fine tufter. She did a lot of jacquard tapestries. And I wouldn't say she motivated me to do fiber, but I think I was just around like amazing artists at Cranbrook that kind of like motivated me to like do something different. Cranbrook is an interdisciplinary school, so they encourage a mix of mediums. And honestly, when I got to Cranbrook, I didn't want to do photography, even though I was in the photography department. Chris was totally fine with that. So I started doing research on like fiber. And during my first year review, I was given the name of Gee's Bend. I was like, did you ever hear of Gee's Bend in Alabama? And I was like, no. So I started doing my research with Gee's Bend, read their story. The women in Gee's Bend quilted. It was a hobby. It wasn't a hobby. It was something they had to do. It was comforters for them to like sleep on. So it was something that they had to do. But at the same time, it was like a work of art. And the women there didn't know anything about it. So I started talking to my family about it. And my mom was like, well, you know, your grandmother was a quilter. I was like, really? And then she was like, yeah. I was like, oh yeah, I do remember her quilting. Like, well, when I was a kid, I would go to her house and just see her quilts on the side of like beds hanging over the couch. And then I started doing more family research, and then I found out that my great-grandmother, Elsie Simmons, was a quilter as well. And then the more I started talking to family members, I found out that we share the same birthday, Christmas Day. So both of us are Christmas babies, which I did not know. And talking to her daughter, Aunt Theo, she was like, you guys share a lot of the same similarities. You both are cooks, chefs. I actually went to culinary school out of high school. So that's kind of something I skipped over, but I went to culinary school right out of high school. So we shared a lot of the same similarities, which was very interesting. And I kind of went for it at Cranbrook, and it's something I've just stuck to, and here I am now. So, yeah.
Well, let's take, so your exhibit with us, Take Me Back, opens in January. And, also a big piece of this is the Black church experience. And, when you were talking about photography and you're talking about fashion and all these elements that go into fashion, and then the textiles that also seems to be, did that influence you even with your photography, your church experience? And can you tell us more about your church experience?
So my church experience was awesome. Again, I was always a kid that was very observant with fashion as a kid. So I would pay attention when I was in church to the choir robes. Everything was in sync. The colors, the fashion, the women's hats, the sequin dresses, the guys' suits and shoes. So I would say, like, during my youth, during my time in the church, it has influenced every aspect of my art career, just not only the show, but every aspect of my art career. But, my experience in the Black church was, I was raised in church. My dad was a trustee and my mom was an usher in the church. So they had us in church since birth. We were in Sunday school every Sunday. My dad was actually a Sunday school teacher. So I just think it was something that their parents inherited from them. So they wanted us, my brothers and myself, to be inherited in the church as well. And as an adult now, I'm still religious. I still go to church off and on, but I still listen to gospel music. And I think that reflects to my mom playing gospel music in the car, to the grocery store, to church, to school. And it was just a family of like upbringing in the church. I had family members that were pastors down south. It's like my whole family has just really been embodied and like marinated in the church. So it's just something that I was just, I guess, expected to do, I guess. But when it comes to like this show, I wanted to do something in my hometown. For this to be my first exhibition in Indianapolis, I wanted something to like pay homage to like my youth. And the church was a big part of my youth. I thought it made sense. I thought it made went hand in hand to what I wanted to present. And I think the works are beautiful. I'm finishing up the last piece now, and I'm really proud. I'm very happy with the progress of the exhibition. I think the quilts are stunning. I actually tapped into some different types of pieces. Canvas stretchers. So I started playing with more like textile pieces, not highlighting the quilts, but like really paying homage to like textiles and my process of that. So I'm excited to exhibit those, and my sketches of where I start with the whole quilting process will be exhibited. So I'm really happy with everything, and I'm happy to be exhibiting with the Two Factory. So,
thank you.
Yeah.
So, one thing I'm also wondering about is you moving from, photography, which is, real. It's realism. It's just, it is what it is. And then, but you have, through your perspective, how did you move from that to abstract works? And will you describe one of the pieces that will be in the show that you're very excited about?
So my process, why did I move from photography to abstraction? I think as an artist, I'm going to remove myself from an artist. I think people are very judgmental outside of the art industry and in the art industry. And I'm just someone that's very protective. My parents had us very protective growing up. There were certain things that we couldn't watch on TV. We were strict Christians, really, living in a household. So my memories to me are just things that I want to protect myself. I don't want people to be judgmental or like add their feedback within anything that I produce. I feel like abstract was something that came to me. It's interesting, but yet protective. It's symbolic. I like to put work out into the world, but not give all the answers, or I kind of want people to figure it out for themselves. I feel like that's what makes art interesting. I like going to art museums and not reading texts and not looking at titles and not looking at wall text, and I just want to like figure it out for myself and understand where the artist is coming from. So I think that's one thing too that I like to do, is just to like, I don't want to tease people, but I kind of want people to work for themselves. I want them to study the works. I want people to look at the color schemes and like the movements within the quilts. And like, I want people to figure it out for themselves. When I first started quilting and working in abstraction, I didn't title my works. A lot of it was just untitled works 1, 2, 3, 4. I think now that, I kind of want to give people some inspiration or where that piece came from. So now I'm starting to like title my works. It could just be off of a song or a phrase in a song or a lyric or a Bible verse to kind of give people some leeway, but not really give the full story out. But I think abstraction is very powerful. I think it's a hard technique in art that everyone can't do. You have to be a real specialist. What am I trying to say? You have to be a very technique artist to work in abstraction. A lot of it stems from my feelings, looking at things and just knowing that it's done, stepping away from something. Whereas to some artists that are working more visually and figurative, they have to hit every corner. Whereas for me, it's like, I don't feel like that, I guess. But I find abstraction to be very powerful. I find it's a beautiful form of art. And I think it just fits my personality. I'm a very quiet, observant individual. And I just don't like to give my business to everybody. So that's one reason why I like abstraction. My favorite piece in the show, there is the main piece. So the main piece there's actually 2 pieces on that main wall when you first walk in. But what I'm learning too is that, everything doesn't have to be large scale. That was something that in graduate school, I thought everything had to be large scale to make a point. But now that I'm in my own space and just stepping away from the graduate school educational element. I find like a small piece can be as powerful as well. So I think my favorite piece in the show is like the main piece. It's orange. It's highlighting, heaven. So I'm working on metallics. The binding of all the quotes are gold metallics. So there's a lot of like symbolic symbols in all of the pieces. But I think that's my favorite piece, is like the main wall piece. I don't have a title for it yet, but that's my favorite piece.
And then, earlier you were just mentioning that, there's an element of protection with both the church and working in abstraction. And then and when you were talking to Kat, you do also talk about having a space after having to navigate predominantly white spaces. Can you talk about that in terms of your work?
Yeah. So navigating my space, my mindset in predominantly white spaces. I was raised on like the north side, Castleton area, Fishers border, in that area. And my mom always tells me the story when I was born, we were one of the first Black families in the neighborhood, and how the neighbors would not speak to my parents. One neighbor actually moved out of the neighborhood like 2 weeks after we moved in. So obviously there's racism, obviously. But, my mom and dad were very powerful people. They stood their ground. They didn't feel timid. They kind of just stood their ground, and they raised us. I have twin brothers as well that was raised in that environment as well. But being around predominantly white people for me was just very intimidating. I didn't have a lot of friends. I was always by myself. And I think that's where a lot of it stems from, me by myself. Imagine I have to occupy myself. So me thinking of things and drawing things in my head and sketching as a young child, and I'm dreaming about things. I think that's where a lot of it started. So for me, during that time, I didn't have a voice. I had to live there. My parents lived there. But I think now, me thinking about those experiences, I think, I don't know. I don't want to say it was good for me, but I kind of feel like in a way I'm upset with my parents because they never really, had us in a Black community, There was a time that I was kind of upset and angry with my parents, but at the same time, I think it was, they were trying to be role models, live, go to school, get a degree, get a good job. You can live in this type of environment. I think it was like that for them. Not thinking about the aspect of living how that can be traumatizing to a Black kid when he's 4 in an all-white neighborhood. And throughout the years, they had Black families move into the neighborhood. We weren't the only Black family. But it was weird because my brothers are 2 years younger than me. So a lot of the kids were their age, but when it came to my age, I didn't have anyone my age to play with. So I still felt isolated. I still felt alone, even though they were Black families in the neighborhood. And even now, my mom moved further north to Noblesville, and we are the only Black family in the neighborhood. So, as an adult, I know there's things that, I can't blast my rap music in the car because I know I'm be viewed a certain type of way. So there's codes for me that I know, living in these white spaces that I can't do. I don't want to be judged. And even, going in the grocery store in Westfield, it's kind of I get the stares, but I know how to carry myself, and there's certain things that I can do. And I think I'm just a professional anyway. I know how to talk to people. I'm educated. I know how to just carry myself as a Black man in these white spaces. So, and I think, and a lot of that stems to within the work too, a lot of white people look down on rap music and the rap culture. And even though I am a Christian and I like gospel music, I still listen to rap music. I feel like I definitely live up to the Black culture very well, I feel like. So So did I answer your question?
Yes.
I think, okay. All right.
Yeah. I mean, so a lot of your experience through even like school and all that, it was
very diverse in school.
It was very diverse in school.
And middle school was diverse, high school was diverse. But you know me, I was just a quiet person anyway. I didn't have friends in high school. I didn't have friends in middle school. So, you know, I just felt alone all the time, you know. So, yeah. So
that was a big piece of you becoming an artist, was this sort of inner world building you had to do to entertain yourself and comfort and protect yourself. So when did you decide you were going to go to art school and be an artist? And how did you run it by your parents? Were they happy or were they iffy about it? How was that?
How did I make my decision to go to art school? So it was culinary school. So I was living in Chicago during the time. So it was like 2015. I was working in restaurants, and restaurants are very hard, long hours, 60 plus hours working in restaurants. The money's not good in restaurants. So I was like, I don't know if I can do this as a career. But again, I was shooting, you know, my friends on the side as a hobby, just to keep myself occupied. And I had a model that was like, Julian, your work is really good. Have you ever thought about going to art school? I'm like, no. So at the time I was living in Chicago, I applied to Herron. When I was in Chicago, got accepted, so I moved back to Indianapolis in 2016, and that's kind of how the art school started. Loved my experience at Herron. Well, Herron is a good school. I just wish there was more diversity in Herron, more Black professors. And my family was very supportive. My dad was supportive. My mom was supportive. It was kind of like that question of like, why? You already have a degree in culinary and pastry arts. But I think that's the one thing about my parents. They've always been supportive. They never said anything negative about it. So they kind of encouraged me to do it. So I was reinforced by them, and yeah. Mm-hmm.
And do you find, and now you're teaching at Herron, and do you find people that know you, do they still think of you as a photographer or do they see this progression in your work?
So do people still view me as a photographer? Yes. It's weird because like that's where I started. Pattern was like my first publication. So like everyone at Pattern, I think, still views me as that fashion photographer. So for me to go to a Detroit, and the people in Detroit know me as a fiber artist. So it's very weird. Like when I go there, there's no questions about fashion, photography for me. They know me as that quilter at Cranbrook. A lot of the galleries I work with know me as that quilter, and a lot of them don't know. I never really talked about my fashion photography background. I talked about like my interest of fashion and how fashion has inspired the work, but I never share the stories of an experience of like being a fashion photographer, traveling, shooting modeling agencies, getting my work published in Vogue and Pattern and all these fashion publications. And I guess it's something I should be excited about and celebrate, but I just kind of keep that to myself. I think it's a process. I think my whole career has been stepping stones of the next. I think if it wasn't for fashion, it would have never been quilting. If it was never photography, it would never be quilting. That's kind of how I view my life. Like, if it wasn't for Cranbrook, I wouldn't be quilting at all. I don't know what I've been doing if it wasn't for Cranbrook.
Your hometown or especially if you come back and people think of you a certain way, they aren't able to see when you change or understand that. And I just wondered if that was something you were going through. And I feel like you have answered that. But I do talk to a lot of artists who always also never feel appreciated by their hometown. So they could be famous. I've known artists who like become famous, but then back home, quote unquote, they're like, oh, it's so and so. You know?
Yeah, I do feel like that. I feel like I definitely feel more validated in Detroit. Like, I can go to any gallery opening and people know who I am. They know the hard work that I've done. They know my credentials. And then here it's nothing, you know. I do feel like that. I think I do get a lot of questions of like, why are you quilting? A lot of people don't know like how powerful quilting is and like what my mission as a quilter is. So people don't understand that because quilting is so rare anyway. A lot of people don't quilt, but now that I've been in the quilting field for almost 3 years, I'm meeting people, and it's rare to find a Black male that quilts. It's not a lot of Black males that quilt. There are males that quilt. I know male quilters, but not male Black quilters. And I know like the traditional form of quilting, you know, like my intention is to kind of break the traditional like quilting format. Like, I'm doing what I want to do. I'm not following patterns. I'm not using a quilting machine. Like, I'm intentionally like breaking the boundary of like what a quilt can be. That's kind of like my mission as a quilter. So I feel like, you know, I'm getting a lot of attention around that. I think a lot of galleries are starting to like notice my perspective because it's so different, and how the transformation of like me creating my own textiles, me using my hand and oil pastels, me painting my textiles and my message, and then they're translated into like fibers and printing on fabrics. So I feel like a lot of people have never seen that process before. A lot of people are interested in that process and want to see like that whole mission of like, what do you do? How do you get textiles on your fabrics? Like, do you draw directly? Do you have it printed? So I get a lot of those questions, which I find that to be interesting, but you know, it is what it is. So. Oh yeah, Kia Davis is a sweetheart. I love her to death. We met last year, right after my solo show with Playground Detroit. So that was in September. She followed me. I don't know what month it was, but I could, you know, I was looking for, I wouldn't say for representation. Well, yes, I was looking for representation at that time. In Detroit, of course. But I needed management. I needed someone to help me get my work outside of the Indianapolis market, outside of the Midwest. That's what the whole goal was. Kia kind of approached me. Well, I kind of approached her. I was like, hey, Kia, I'm looking for management, you know. So it kind of happened like that. We got on a call. We discussed my goals as an artist. And we kind of just started working together. She's helped me so much. She's got my work in LA, the LA market. I was in a group show with Jack Forbes Contemporary, an awesome gallery, an awesome gallerist, Jack Forbes. I think now we're trying to get into the New York market. That's our goal for 2024. So I think it's, for any artist, I think it's very helpful to have someone to help you. I think a lot of people are scared to ask for help. Definitely in art. Art is very hard to navigate, and you got to know the right people to do it. I know I couldn't do it by myself, just being a Midwestern and not having a lot of connections. So I needed someone to like help me and help push my work beyond that. And Kia has done that for me. You know, goals for me, you know, is representation. I think the next step for me is representation.
Yeah.
You know, and just talking to people in Detroit, you know, why I say Detroit is because my style, my craft developed in Detroit. I come from a very established Cranbrook. Cranbrook is a very established graduate program. A lot of people in Detroit recognize the artists that come out from Cranbrook. And there's a gallery, I'm not going to say its name there, that I really want to work with. We've worked together multiple times. I love their leadership there. one of the founders is actually from Indianapolis, which I did not know. So we have the same Indianapolis mindset. She knows where I'm coming from. She knew the high school I went to. I know the high school she went to. So there was a lot of connection when it comes to that. But for me to go back to Detroit and and live there, that's kind of a goal for me, is to kind of go back to Detroit and not jump into a New York so fast. I feel like New York is very saturated. I feel like it's more for like, mid-career professional artists. I feel like I'm not there yet. I feel like I'm more of an emerging artist. And I feel like Detroit is a city that highlights emerging artists. And I just would love to just put my work on that platform, meet their collectors, and just grow my practice in a Detroit. So.
And you have, so that kind of answer, I was going to ask, do you plan on staying here?
Oh, okay.
Yeah. But
yeah.
You do want to ultimately end up back in Detroit, but where do you want to be, like, overall as an artist? Like, does it have to do with place? Does it have to do with specific gallery? The high art world is very, it's a very difficult place to navigate. So I just wondered where you want to see yourself. Is it within the high art world? And does it have to do, like, where you live now matters less than it used to, but it still matters because you got to be at the right parties, So.
Yeah. Where do I see myself? I would love to be in the high art world. I feel like my work has potential. And that's one thing, too. I tell a lot of artists, too, that, like, ask for advice. If you don't believe in your practice, it's not going to go nowhere. I believe in my practice. I believe that my work has a commercial look to it. I see my work in New York City. I see my work in London. I visually see that for myself. Living wise, I would love to live in like a London one day. And just, get gallery representation overseas, internationally would be awesome. And just really get my work in like permanent collections, private collections. I think locally, one goal is to get my work into new fields. That would be a great accomplishment for me. But yeah, definitely navigating the high art world one day and kind of just taking it one step at a time. I feel like that's kind of how I have to tell myself, just take it one step at a time.
Yeah.
Because it can be very overwhelming. Art is very complicated. I tell people that all the time. It's very complicated and you just have to have thick skin. That's one thing that I've learned, is that you can't be sensitive. People are going to hate your work. There's people that hate my work now, which is totally fine. But there also have people that love what I do. So you just got to entertain the people that like what you do and continue to feed them good content. I think social media is a big thing too, just really pushing your work and being consistent. I bet you there's galleries looking at me now. They're probably looking at me as, is he consistent? Is his work changing? Like, what is he doing? So those are things in the back of my head that I continue just always think about. Be consistent on social media. Be careful what you post on social media. I think that was it.
Yeah, I think it's always a good thing, even if people hate something, because the worst thing, that I have experienced as a curator that I would never want to have happen again is when people just don't care. When they just walk in and they just are like, well, whatever. I just prefer when people either love or hate the work. And so I think it's a good thing that you have people who hate your work. That's a compliment if someone does hate your work.
I've never met anyone that hated my work, but I know there's people out there that hate what I do or don't get it or a lot of questions of abstraction. I know people that just don't get abstraction. A lot of people just don't understand it. I think one example too is me standing and looking at my work and looking at people's observations at the Butter Art Fair. I think that was a good market for me to kind of like test myself and really understand like what people like here. So just people were walking past my piece, which is fine. Because I didn't want to, they didn't get it. And I think sometimes it's good that people don't understand your work. I think that's a strong statement to make people really stare and really ponder and really like connect the dots. To me, it's more interesting than just walking up to a piece and getting exactly what they're trying to do. And I think, and it's fine. My market might not be Indianapolis. That's totally fine. So that's why I'm kind of wanting, I think that's one reason why I don't want to be here, because I just know my work doesn't fit the Indianapolis market. The Indianapolis market is very visual, very figurative. It's very like straight to the point, and my work is not like that. So it's okay. It's fine. But I do want to go somewhere where my work feels appreciated and people understand what I'm trying to communicate through my fiber and quilting. So
I also don't think there's much of a market here. To be honest, there's not a ton of money. There's not a lot of wealthy people who are buying from here, from artists or galleries here. So I just, and then a lot of times people will buy something once and then they're done. They're like, I got my piece that goes above the couch, and it's like a one and done situation here. So I just feel like we're still building a market. We're still building an arts audience here. And just from my opinion is I don't know that we can support like a visual artist who's very a big
name. And that's another thing too. I feel like that question has been brought up. Like, why just stay here, Julian? You build that market up. You bring your people here. You start a gallery here. Like, and I mean, I think it's hard. And like you said, there's no market here, but
you'd have to become famous.
Yeah.
Super famous and then move back here.
Yeah.
I mean, it's kind of, you think about what Theaster Gates is doing in Chicago. And Chicago is like one of the meccas currently in my mind in the high art world. So it's just as important as New York or LA. But, I think it would take something like that, like, because it's still not, it's not a place where that a lot of people from all over the world want to go unless they're interested in the 500. I'm just going to be honest.
Yeah, you're right.
I love living here and I love working here. But if you're a New Yorker or from LA, like I worked with an artist once who was based in Chicago, and he looked at me and he said, "Chate, do you really want to die here?" I was like, I'd never thought of it that way, but I was like, so yeah, I mean, just, honest, and your work, I don't think you can do both. I don't think you can have a gallery and run a gallery and be an artist. I think maybe some people do it, but there comes a point where people have to choose what they're going to do.
Right.
And your work, like I said, I find it very, I have emotions when I look at it. Like I have feelings, and like, and they're all over it's not just one feeling. Like there is just an emotional interaction between your works, which is what I love about them. That even though it might be about navigating or feeling protective or navigating a white space as a Black artist, when you work in abstraction, it's not diluting your experience, but it's universal.
Right.
Like it's something anyone can connect with. If they want to, if they're open to it. So that's one thing I love about your work. And then let's talk about your works on paper. So you also will have works on paper in this exhibit. Let's talk about that process.
So the works on paper is the first process of the quilts. And for this show in particular, I was listening to a lot of like gospel music that kind of generated some inspiration. I listened to some sermons, read Bible verses. So for a day, I took that time to kind of meditate in my studio, and that's kind of how I get the creative juices flowing. Because for me, like abstraction and me sketching, I have to be in the proper mindset to do that. Every day I can't sketch. It just depends on my mood or me not feeling it for that day. And it's interesting because like one day I can sketch and then the next day I can sketch, but the sketches look completely different from the previous day, which I find that to be very interesting. It's not like, I don't know what I'm trying to say. It's not a standard look through all my sketches. I feel like each day it's something different or a different emotion that comes about. But typically I sketch on 9x12 paper. And sometimes I don't. Music is just going, or I'm listening to music in my headphones, and I kind of just react to the music I'm playing or it's something I just read. So, for example, in my previous show at Playground, all of my quilts were black. So I was using a lot of like black pastels and really like angry and I feel like that show was very about like scared about going into the professional art world and really like nervous about it. So, a lot of those pieces were just really dark, blacks, blues, very heavy, like saturated colors. And these colors for this show are very like light, the yellows, the golds, the purples. There is a black piece that I did decide to put in the show. But I think it connects to all aspects of the Bible and personality of the church. Everything in the Bible isn't pretty, prim, and proper. You got scriptures talking about hell and, the last days and, the new earth. Like, so a lot of those work, I feel like this show is very like, I'm bringing a lot of variety when it comes to the sketching. So I feel like, so I can hit every element and meet every standard when it comes to like my emotions. But to answer the question, sketching is something that I do in my free time. It kind of just started as a hobby. But I just use oil pastels, pastel pencils, pastel chalks, and I kind of just sketch, pushing mood and emotion. And then after I have a large variety of sketches, I kind of like study them, kind of study which ones I like, which ones pair well with another one. So for this show, I probably did at least 200 sketches. All of them obviously will not be on view for this show. But for this show, I also was using larger paper. So I was sketching on like 18x24, which that's something I typically don't do when it comes to just me sketching out of just coming out, but that was a new process for me. And then once I decide which ones I want to like use within the quilts, I scan them in Photoshop and then kind of crop them out, kind of up the saturation. So this is kind of where the photography comes into. A lot of people say, how does this play? Because photography is all about Photoshop, cropping things, orientation, upping saturation. So my studies in photography could definitely come in play when I scan things. I do not print the fabrics by myself. I use a outsource company that does that for me. So I select the fabrics that I want to use and I order them and then they ship to my house and that's where the quilt process comes. So, yep.
Are there any pieces you wouldn't sell that you don't want to part with or maybe aren't quite ready to, and why?
Are there pieces that I don't want to part with?
That you wouldn't sell.
That I wouldn't sell.
That you've made up to this date.
Mm-hmm. So actually, my first quilt that I ever made is with a gallery in Asheville. And that's a piece that I really don't want to sell because it was my first piece that I studied with for 3 months. So it was that break during graduate school, the first summer. That was the first piece I did that summer. It took me 4 months to do that quilt. But that was the first time of me using this new process. There's a couple of pieces that I don't want to part with or don't want to sell because it's just something that I want to just hang in my home. And it's weird because I don't really have a lot of art of my own in my own home, which is very weird. A lot of people ask me, like, why don't you exhibit your own work? And it's something that I don't think too hard about. But I think now it's something that I definitely will focus on in 2024, just really making work for myself, not being seen for the public. I think for me, it's just all about just producing work, putting my work out there for people to see, not really thinking about my enjoyment and my pleasure when it comes to my own practice. So I think it's something I really want to focus on in 2024 is just producing work for me in my home and in my space and in my studio for me to like and enjoy. So,
what is the Black church experience in your words?
The Black church experience for me, it is energetic, soulful, harmonic. I think it's a pleasurable experience for me. Because I've met people throughout the years that don't believe in a God, which is fine. I'm not a judgment. I work with people that don't believe in God. But for me, I feel like it's something for me to like, put faith in, for me to like release anger to, or for me to like talk to somebody in a spiritual realm. I think it's just something for me. I feel like it was just a standard that my parents did for us. And I know people that were raised in the church and in their adult years, they've left the church. I know a lot of people. I've met a lot of people in art school that were like that. I work with people that were raised in church and they just decided that that's something they don't want to affiliate with, or just they don't believe in. I kind of believe in, like, you believe what you believe. Who am I to judge anybody about who they don't believe in or anything? So I feel like I'm very open when it comes to religion, and there are things in the Bible that I do question. But, I feel like it's something for me to be a born again Christian. That's something that I have to stand on and be firm with and just go with it, Now, have I questioned Christianity? I have questioned it. But I don't feel like it's something that I want to completely like turn my head on and just don't think about or never experience again in my life, because it was such an inspiration and it was such a time in my life that, I feel like there was memories in the church that I don't want to forget about. A lot of like my friends now I've met in the church, people that even my parents, a lot of their friends they still talk to are from the Black church, So, the church has its benefits, socially and spiritually. Did I answer your question?
Yes. I mean, okay. I think whether or not people are religious or not, there's still a universe. Mm-hmm. It's universal.
Right.
The what we want as humans, that belonging that it provided, the beauty that it provided to you, this whole experience. And I love that you're honoring it and not afraid to, because a lot of people, especially when it comes into the high art world, become afraid. And I think it's courageous to be exploring this. So that's my opinion.
Yeah.
So,
yeah.
Can you tell us, what are you listening to when you're making work that inspire? We had talked a little bit about a soundtrack, maybe to your show. Can you give us a few songs?
Yeah. What are songs that you're listening to that inspire the work now, or just songs that I'm listening to? So Total Praise is one of my favorite songs. It's from Richard Smallwood. So the main piece is after that song. I listened to a lot of Kirk Franklin. He was like a big gospel artist in the 90s that I remember as a kid. Hezekiah Walker, a lot of pieces are named after him. He's still a huge gospel musician now. And just songs from the choir that I remember. So there was a song that my choir sung at Jones Tabernacle Amy Zion Church, Omnipotent. They used to sing that all the time. So I'm pulling that song from that. So a lot of Kirk Franklin songs, Matthew 28, that's a really dominant song about, Jesus rose from East. That's a very Easter song. And I am also listening to some college choirs. So the Florida A&M University Gospel Choir, they have a song, Let Everything That Hath Breath. So that's a piece that's named after that. So a lot of old 90s music. And that was one thing too about this exhibition that I found that I wanted to highlight, because there's gospel music now in the 2000s. There's current modern day gospel music, but I feel like the music that I was raised with was more organic. It was more choral. It was more thought out, well written. You can kind of parallel that to rap too. The rap from the 90s were they're more iconic raps, things that live on past our generation. Timeless, that's what we say in rap, a timeless rap song. Missy Elliott to me is someone that's a timeless rap star that you can play her music from the early 2000s, but it's still relevant now. So that's kind of what I'm highlighting in gospel music, songs that live past our generation, songs that were made now or that are still a hit, that people still reference, songs that choirs still sing to this day that are 20, 30 years old. And for some reason, I'm not really attracted to current day gospel songs. They just don't hit the heart different for me. They just don't hit me like the old gospel, deep 3-part soprano, alto, tenor type choral songs that I like. So that's what I'm listening to during the duration of this exhibition. Are you going back to school, Julian?
Are you going back to school, Julian?
I think I am. It's an opportunity to go back to Cranbrook and study in their painting department. And why I'm considering it is that painting is an ultimate medium. It's the top medium. Collectors want painting. So really growing my sketches into canvases. I wonder what that look will look for me. Combining the quilting with the canvases and really experimenting with what my verbiage of a painting will be. So I'm thinking about it, but who knows? We'll see. I don't know.
So Julian Jamaal Jones's work is going to continue to evolve, and you know that's exciting.
Mm-hmm. So it's something I'm really considering. I even thought about studying the art theory, because that was something that I mean, as a master's student at Cranbrook, you do your research, but really wanting time to really study the theory of art, the abstraction theory, and what that person thought about abstraction. So even getting invited to studying in the PhD program was something that I thought about. And I love teaching. I love my students at Herron. So really maybe teaching at a high art university and teaching theories of abstraction would be interesting. I don't know, but I think there's a lot of opportunities that I'm still trying to figure out and really think about. But as of right now, I feel like going back to Detroit, studying at Cranbrook would be probably my first choice right now. So that's an option. So
people need to come see this exhibit.
Oh, yeah, please.
People will need to come see Take Me Back.
Yeah.
It will open in January and run through March 24th. And the exhibition was made possible by the Andy Warhol Foundation for the Visual Arts, Ruth Arts Foundation, Herron School of Art and Design, Arts Council of Indianapolis and the City of Indianapolis, Allen Whitehill Clues Charitable Foundation, Ephraimson Family Fund, and the Institute of Museum and Library Sciences. So, Julian, if people want to follow your work, where can they follow your work at?
I'm more active on Instagram. So my Instagram is julianjones.studios. And you can see all my work from there. And you can feel free to DM me if you have questions or interests. Anybody that's interested in buying my work, you can email me at julianjonesstudios@gmail.com. Or you can also send me a DM too. So, yep.
All right. Well, thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you so much for joining us and for your exhibit with us. I'm very happy to host it. And people need to come see it.
Thank you for the opportunity.